During the 3 summer seasons, all localities use and equipment to do a good job in summer harvest, summer planting and summer management according to local conditions, laying a solid foundation for the annual grain harvest. Baidu Satellite Assisted Harvester Fully Automatic Harvesting. Summer grain accounts for about a quarter of my country's total annual grain output, of which wheat production accounts for more than 90% of summer grain output. Recently, wheat has been harvested one after another in the middle and lower reaches of the Yangtze River. In Jiangsu, unmanned harvesters have become a good helper for farmers. With the help of Baidu satellites, the harvesters can enter the state of fully automatic harvesting through remote operation through mobile phones. In Dazug, Sichuan, high-standard farmland construction provides a strong guarantee for the mechanization of wheat sowing, management, and harvesting. Yu Yun, Secretary of the Party Committee of the Agricultural and Rural Bureau of Dazhou County, Sichuan Province, the mechanization rate of the whole process has reached more than 85%, which saves 200 yuan per mu compared with previous years. Zhangji, Gansu, mechanized tomato transplanting reduces costs and increases efficiency. In the planting base in Jiaotai County, Zhangji City, Gansu Province, 11 tomato transplanting machines are shuttled back and forth in the field, transplanting tomato seedlings in an orderly manner. On the tomato transplanting machine, workers only need to put the seedlings into the seedling box, and they can complete operations such as digging holes, planting seedlings, supporting seedlings, covering soil, and compacting at one time. Wherever they pass, rows of tomato seedlings are neatly arranged in the ground. Yang Hongui, person in charge of the planting base, 11 transplanting machines, transplanting volume, can reach more than 300 manual plantings a day, and the survival rate is more impressive than manual planting. Chongqing Jiangjin, mechanization helps sweet potato planting to increase agricultural income. Sweet potato transplanting has always been a difficult problem that affects and restricts the cost-saving and efficiency-enhancing of the sweet potato industry. Jiangjin district of Chongqing introduced sweet potato transplanting machines for the first time this year. In this demonstration base, semi-automatic sweet potato transplanting machines are in progress. After the ridging machine completes the ridging, the sweet potato transplanting machine does not need to be driven by personnel, and only one person is required to assist in placing the seedlings to complete the transplanting work. Qiu Benping, head of the cooperative, if 1 mu of land is planted by hand, at least 10 people will be employed. We use the whole process of mechanization for planting. According to calculations, it may be possible to plant an acre with 1/2 worker, which greatly reduces labor and saves labor costs. On May 20, 2023, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Hiroshima, Japan, to attend the G7 summit. On the same day, the Russian Wagner mercenary group announced the capture of Bakhmut, a transportation hub in eastern Ukraine, which Russia has always called Artyomovsk. International public opinion generally believes that Russia announced the capture of Artyomovsk during the talks between Ukraine and the G7 summit, with the purpose of publicly humiliating Western countries that support Ukraine, and at the same time boosting the morale of Russia's military and civilians. This is a wonderful move, which played an excellent role, boosting the morale of the Russian army on the Ukrainian battlefield and mobilizing the spirit for the next attack. Of course, Ukraine and NATO will not sit still. Sure enough, on May 22, Ukraine's counterattack against Russia came as scheduled. According to news from TASS, Agence France Presse and other foreign media on the 22nd, Gladkov, the governor of the Russian Belgorod region near the Ukrainian border, said on the same day that a Ukrainian sabotage organization crossed the border and entered Russian territory. The Romans slaughtered everyone and razed the once mighty city, including the Jewish temple, the Second Temple. Rome sieges Jerusalem, image, wallpaperaccess.com. In AD 70, Rome waged a massive siege of Jerusalem, and it was a bloody battle. The siege of Jerusalem was the culmination of the First Jewish Revolt, 66 to 73 AD. It led to the destruction of the Second Temple. In the end, only the western wall of the temple survived. Today, it is known as the Wailing Wall. Vespasian from general to emperor. The Roman Jewish province at bottom right, image, Middlewich Virtual Museum.co.uk. In AD 66, a rebellion broke out in the obscure Roman province of Judea, present-day Israel. Unexpectedly, this rebellion directly shook the foundation of this powerful empire. In AD 67, Emperor Nero sent the old Roman general Vespasian, Yes, Vespasian, who later became Roman emperor, to put down the rebellion. From the beginning of the revolt, the Romans found it difficult to fight the fanatical Jews. Still, Rome's military might was too strong for the rebels. Meanwhile, in AD 68, Emperor Nero committed suicide, which sparked a civil war. The year was also known as the Year of the Four Emperors, because 4 people were vying for the throne at the same time. In AD 70, Vespasian, a Roman general who returned from Judea, became the new absolute ruler of the empire. However, Vespasian did not finish his work in Judea, capturing Jerusalem, and the fabled Masada. Vespasian's son, Titus, besieging Jerusalem. The future Emperor Titus was tasked with putting down the rebellion. Credit, Wikimedia Commons. Vespasian's eldest son, Titus, received the task of quelling Jewish resistance. On paper, Titus' task looks easy. He had at his disposal a large and well-trained army whose chief object was the capture of Jerusalem, the composition of which was as follows. 21,000 professional soldiers. 16,000 auxiliary infantry. 3,000 cavalry. 20,000 allies. Jews in Jerusalem, fighting like fanatics. Fortified Jerusalem in AD 70, photo, musulmanka.su. The defenders of Jerusalem numbered about 20,000. However, these soldiers were not united. Because they belonged to different religious groups, they often hate each other. On one occasion, during the infighting, the rebels even burned a large amount of food for their own people. However, under the combination of the majestic walls of Jerusalem and the fanaticism of the Jewish defenders, capturing Jerusalem is still a daunting task for the Roman army. At the beginning of the siege, a group of Jews climbed out of the city walls and found a Roman scouting party led by Titus himself. General Titus was not wearing a breastplate or helmet, and the Jews almost succeeded in killing him. The Romans had to use all the siege techniques they had mastered to break through Jerusalem's defenses. The siege of Jerusalem lasted 5 months. It began in March 70 AD and ended in September. Siege techniques to conquer Jerusalem. The Jewish garrison attacked the Romans while the Romans built siege equipment to attack Jerusalem. Credit, Pinterest/@Fufluos. Below, let us take a look at the siege techniques applied by the Romans during their conquest of Jerusalem. 1. Surrounded. Circular encirclement, image source, Wikimedia Commons. The Romans surrounded Jerusalem with a wall to starve the defenders and prevent their escape. The Romans built 8 kilometers of wooden walls and built wooden towers between them for reinforcement. Titus ordered each legion to compete with each other to see which one could be the first to build its own wooden wall in the area under its charge. Since then, the defenders can no longer sneak out at night to look for food. The Romans crucified all those caught in order to destroy the morale of the defenders. In addition, legionnaires liked to cut open the stomachs of captured Jews, who they believed had swallowed valuables. 2. Ballista. Roman soldiers at the ballista, ready to go, photo, aromaker.hu. The ballista was one of the main weapons of the Romans during the siege of Jerusalem. Ballistas are huge crossbows that fire bolts or stones over great distances. The strongest ballista with a range of up to 1,100 meters. The Romans used these catapults to clear the defenders from the walls in a targeted manner, allowing battering rams and siege towers to reach safely below the walls. 3. Trebuchet. Roman trebuchet, image, Pinterest. The Roman army was once legendary for using trebuchets. These trebuchets were invented by the ancient Greeks. The Romans absorbed them and put them to good use during the siege. The Romans called their trebuchets Roman cannons. They can throw stones weighing 150 kilograms over a distance of 90 meters. However, the defenders of Jerusalem could see the flying stones and avoid them because they were white. This bothered the Romans for a long time, and they didn't know why until after they captured Josephus, the Jew who turned to Rome, what I would call Jewish, and then they started painting the stone gray. Siege tower. Roman siege towers, photo, imperiumromanumber.pl. The Romans built many of these siege towers to climb the walls and attack the defenders directly. 5. Battering ram. Roman battering ram, image credit, Wikimedia Commons. The Romans also used huge battering rams to smash down the gates of Jerusalem. 6. Siege walls. Roman troops built a siege wall to reach inside Jerusalem. Credit, alchitron.com. These Romans were great innovators and builders. They believed that the best way to get past the wall was to build a siege wall to the top of the wall and attack the defenders directly on the wall. Really generous. 7. The progress of the siege of Rome. The progress of the Roman army during the siege of Jerusalem. Image credit, Wikimedia Commons. After the Romans breached the outer walls of Jerusalem, the siege was far from over. Most of their army retreated to the castle, which stood on top of a hill and contained the Antonia fortress and the sanctuary. The Romans had to besiege another set of huge walls. After the Antonia fortress was breached, the Jews hid in the strong temple and continued to resist. The temple was eventually burned down. But the Jews still resisted in the upper city. They fight on the roof. The Romans had to fight for every meter of the city. By the end of the siege had taken a huge toll on the Romans in terms of casualties and time. The Jews fought valiantly. They did everything possible to stop the Romans. They burned Roman siege equipment many times. They destroyed the Roman siege walls, causing them to fall. They kept going out to harass the Roman engineers. In fact, the timing of the Jewish uprising was ill-timed. In the 1st century AD, the military power of Rome at that time was extremely powerful, and it has continued to grow since then. Destruction of the Second Temple. Roman soldiers take the famous 7-branched menorah from the Second Temple in Jerusalem, illustration courtesy of Radu Oldian. The Second Temple is a reconstruction of Solomon's Temple. It represents the holiest shrine to the Jewish people. Although Titus didn't want to destroy the temple, he lost control of the army. As so often happens after a long and bloody siege, the frenzied Roman soldiers started killing, raping and pillaging. Titus couldn't stop them. Heaps of corpses rose higher and higher, while rivers of blood flowed from the steps of the temple, and the bodies of those killed at the top kept sliding to the bottom. Historian Josephus, on the Roman army description of the massacre of Jewish civilians. Then, a great tragedy happened. Roman soldiers set fire to the Temple of Solomon, the holiest site in Judaism, eventually burning it down. The Romans destroyed everything around the temple until only part of the walls remained. It has become a holy place for the Jews of later generations, the Wailing Wall. Jerusalem was so razed to the ground by those who tore it down to its foundations that there was nothing to convince tourists that it was once a city of tens of thousands. Historian Josephus. On May 20, 2023, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Hiroshima, Japan, to attend a G7 summit. On the same day, the Russian Wagner mercenary group announced the capture of Bakhmut, a transportation hub in eastern Ukraine, which Russia has always called Artemovsk. On May 20, 2023, international public opinion generally believes that Russia announced the capture of Artemovsk during the talks between Ukraine and the G7 summit, with the purpose of publicly humiliating Western countries that support Ukraine, and at the same time boosting the morale of Russia's military and civilians. This is a wonderful move, which played an excellent role, boosting the morale of the Russian army on the Ukrainian battlefield and mobilizing the spirit for the next attack. Of course, Ukraine and NATO will not sit still. Sure enough, on May 22, Ukraine's counterattack against Russia came as scheduled. According to news from TASS, Agence France Presse and other foreign media on the 22nd, Gladkov, the governor of the Russian Belgorod region near the Ukrainian border, said on the same day that a Ukrainian sabotage organization crossed the border and entered Russian territory. The Russian side is conducting an eradication operation, taking all necessary measures to eliminate the enemy. Hantang think tank integrated other media sources, and the general situation is as follows. On the morning of May 22, Ukrainian special forces attacked the Belgorod region near the Ukrainian border and occupied 3 residential settlements. Ukrainian militants seized a police station, looting police uniforms and police cars. It is reported that Ukrainian militants shot and killed many civilians after occupying residential areas. This unscrupulous behavior, on the one hand, aroused the anger of Russia, and on the other hand, it also caused local civilians to panic. In order to deceive people, or to move freely and unrestrictedly, these Ukrainian militants who entered Russia claimed to be Russians, and used the names of Russian volunteers and Russian Freedom Corps. In fact, it doesn't matter what flag these militants fly, because special forces operations are highly camouflaged. And most importantly, it is enough to confirm that these people are militants in the service of Ukraine. Regarding this matter, The Ukrainian Ministry of National Defense Intelligence Directorate responded to the media, "We did not break into Russia." Prior to this, Ukrainian intelligence agencies have attacked targets in Russia many times, and they will never admit it after doing it. In April 2022, the Russian Federal Security Service uncovered an assassination incident targeting people in Russia, and captured several gangs attempting to assassinate the famous Russian TV host and journalist Vladimir Solovyov. Russian officials said the captured assassins belonged to Ukrainian neo-Nazis who were instructed by Ukrainian authorities to sneak into Russia and plan to assassinate the famous Russian journalist before fleeing Russia with fake passports. In the early morning of August 21, 2022, a car bomb attack occurred in Moscow, Russia. Ms. Dalia Dugina, a political scientist and journalist, was killed in the explosion. The investigative committee of the Russian Federation announced that the investigation revealed that explosives were placed under the driver's seat, and that this incident was an assassination planned by unknown persons behind the scenes. The target of the assassination was originally Eugene and his daughter. Regarding the attack, Podolyak, an advisor to the Ukrainian president's office, said, "Ukraine has nothing to do with yesterday's car bombing. We are not a criminal country, let alone a terrorist country." On August 22, the Russian Federal Security Service announced that the case of Dugina's murder had been solved. The criminal act of killing Dugina was prepared and carried out by the Ukrainian secret services. The performer is Natalia Pavlovna Vovk, citizen of Ukraine born in 1979. After committing the crime, Vovk fled to Estonia via the Pskov region using the Ukrainian license plate number. Regarding the results of the Russian investigation, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine is not responsible for Dugina's death. On October 8, 2022, an explosion occurred on the Crimea bridge connecting the Crimea Peninsula. A truck exploded while passing on the bridge, detonating a tanker train that passed by. After the explosion, Podolyak, an advisor to the Ukrainian president's office, claimed that Ukrainian special forces attacked the bridge. On October 9, the Russian side announced the conclusion of the investigation. The Crimean bridge explosion was a terrorist attack planned by the Ukrainian Secret Service. Subsequently, Podolyak, an advisor to the Ukrainian president's office, changed his words and declared that the explosion had nothing to do with Ukraine, and Ukraine was not responsible for the explosion. Regarding the bridge explosion, Putin stated that the Crimea bridge explosion was a terrorist act aimed at destroying important Russian civilian infrastructure. Ukrainian agents were the masterminds and executors of the Crimean bridge bombing. On May 3, 2023, according to Russian media reports, the Kremlin, the official residence of the Russian president, was attacked by a drone, causing no casualties. Russia issued a statement saying that the Ukrainian side used 2 drones to attack the Kremlin that day and were shot down by the Russian army. The attack caused no loss of life or material. On the same day, Podolyak, an advisor to the Ukrainian president's office, stated that Ukraine had nothing to do with the attack because it does not solve any military purpose. For more than a year, the previous attacks launched by Ukraine have not been accepted afterwards. The reason is that the United States has been openly opposing Ukraine's direct access to the Russian mainland in order to prevent the war from getting out of control. On May 22, at the press conference of the U.S. State Department, a reporter asked that there were pictures showing that U.S. weapons had been used in Ukraine's offensive against Russia's Belgorod state. Does the U.S. support Ukraine's use of U.S. weapons on Russian territory? Will the United States change its plan to supply F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine? The spokesperson of the U.S. State Department stated that President Biden has made it very clear that the U.S. will start training the Ukrainian army to fly F-16 fighter jets and will cooperate with allies and partners to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. Implementation will begin in the United States in the coming months. The United States has made clear to Ukraine that it will not allow or encourage attacks outside Ukraine. For the United States, it is the best choice to control the conflict between Russia and Ukraine to a degree that it can control. The Russia-Ukraine conflict can neither end the war, nor force Russia to use nuclear weapons to solve the problem. Once it comes to a nuclear war, the United States cannot bear the burden. Then, it is logical for Ukraine to use the Nazis to retaliate wildly against Russia while denying it. However, the so-called constraints imposed by the United States on Ukraine are also superficial. Ukraine only needs to arrange for Nazi armed forces to enter Russia for assassination attacks. Do you still want to use the regular army to occupy Moscow? That is just a dream. Confluence of Ukrainian Nazis and Japanese militarism. Overall, Ukraine's series of assassination bombings and massacres against Russian civilian targets and civilian facilities have deeply verified Russia's reason for launching special military operations, the Nazification of Ukraine. The Ukrainian armed forces carried out genocide against the Russians in eastern Ukraine. The Western world in the United States and Europe has never condemned this. In fact, some actions of the Ukrainian side already have the typical characteristics of state terrorism. In the face of such acts of state terrorism, it is impossible for ordinary people to stand up to them. Undoubtedly, in the face of Ukraine's various behaviors that ignore international law, Russia can only pay more energy and cost to prevent it. No matter how the war evolves, the butcher's knife of the state machine should not be directed at civilians.